This is Lansdowne Roar, the voice of the fans, and it's a very special episode of Lansdowne Roar. Yesterday, I had the pleasure to speak to Paul Little, the author of Shattered Dreams and Sliding Doors. It's a brand new book. It's out right now. And if you like anything to do with Irish football history, you need to buy this book. It is in the description below. It is about the doomed 1982 World Cup qualifying campaign where the Republic of Ireland went out on goal difference and were robbed. It is fantastic. I'm not just saying it because he hasn't slipped me any money or anything. It is really a brilliant book. And if you like your Irish football history, you definitely need to read it. Before we get started, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Head over to our Facebook, Instagram, and our Twitter account and buy the book, please. Just down below in the description. You won't be sorry. Paul, thanks very much for joining us here on Lansdowne Roar. You are very welcome.
Thank you, Dave. Delighted to be with you.
Absolutely. Just want to say apologies, folks, if we do have a little drop in qualities. Just I am in Luxembourg at the moment, as you can tell, and the Wi-Fi isn't great. So I'm just going to say that now because I'll get a bit of stick off the Roar faithful out there. First of all, Paul, yeah, you know, your book about the 1982 qualifying campaign, Shattered Dreams, Sliding Doors. First of all, loved it. Read it in about 3 days. Absolutely devoured it. I have to ask, obviously, you know, you write it through the eyes of a 10-year-old boy as it's happening real time. But why now? Why release it now?
Well, there's no particular reason in terms of timing. There's a few things, I guess. I was looking for a subject, I suppose they say, write about what you know, I guess. And that's the first of Ireland's World Cup campaigns that I remember as a child. So without giving too much away, I guess the 10-year-old boy in the book is me. It's not entirely seen from my point of view, but nevertheless, it's a kind of a conceit that runs through the book, I suppose, in terms of where I come in and out. But it was just, as I say, trying to find something to write about that meant something to me, I guess, was a large part of it. Obviously, I think I'm one amongst, I suppose, many Irish fans who remember that particular campaign, even as a child, but as adults, it was anybody that I've talked to about the book. The first word that comes up is Brussels any time. But as I say, in terms of why, as I say, that was something that appealed to me. The game against France in Lansdowne Road, the last qualifier, was the first match I ever attended. And so that in itself has kind of, obviously resonance. Another thing, I'd written my first book about Dixie Dean's time at Sligo Rovers, and I was delighted to see that on bookshelves and to get it published, and not a little surprised. In a way, it was a story that I kind of enjoyed and always wanted to research. Whether I wasn't sure whether anybody else would be that interested, but having gotten that, I was looking for something to show perhaps that it wasn't a fluke, and that I could write another book and see and get it out there. Another motivation, actually, just in a broader sense, is that I just kind of like to see more books about Irish football on the bookshelves. So when you go into a bookshop, the football section is large in almost every bookshop, but by and large, it's full of football from elsewhere. And I'm not against football from elsewhere. I'm absolutely entranced by football from everywhere. But by and large, the books about Irish football tend to be biographies or autobiographies, and maybe a few other things. So we've got a long history of soccer in this country, and I think it'd be nice to have more books telling some of the stories on the shelves. And this particular story is one, as I say, that I had a relationship with in itself, and so I thought it'd be a nice one to tell. And it had the way it was written in the end was it changed, but I wanted to see, could I write that particular campaign. I had another relationship with it. I was actually in school with Owen Hand's son, Gary, but maybe 2 or 3 years after. So when I think for the Euros campaign in '84, we started in secondary school together. And whilst Gary was in my class in school, I actually wasn't even aware. It never occurred to me that his dad was Owen Hand, even though they had the same surname. And it was only as things started to turn bad. I know that Gary had a kind of a toughish time in school then from that period onwards. So that was something that always stuck with me, actually, from that time. I could never, as a child, understand why people actually just wouldn't be blown away by the fact that Gary's dad was the Ireland manager, rather than cribbing and complaining about how things were going for the Irish team. I always found that a kind of a difficult thing. So it was just a story that appealed to me. I wanted to try something maybe a little bit different when I did try and write it. I think it's, as I say, Brussels comes up and it is a major part of Irish kind of
Oh
football
yeah.
folklore. And I think that's, it has been told, we know it from a historical perspective, but I just wanted to maybe write it again and then write it maybe slightly differently.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, for those of the newer fans watching this, like people talk about Thierry Henry, but this was not the first one either, but this
No.
was a major, major robbery for the boys in green. Like I actually have the footage, and I went back and watched it. I have the game, like the full 90 minutes, and I mean the Ireland goal is chalked off because, from what I can remember, the goalie takes out the defender, his own defender, and the referee looks at the linesman, and then he just gives it a free kick out, and you're looking at it going, what?
Yeah,
And
it's just
then
not clear. That's the whole thing. That's what's so perturbing about it, is you don't really know
yeah,
why.
it's outrageous. Like it's so
Yeah.
blatantly obvious, and then the dive into the box, like where the guy literally, when you watch a comedy and the guy's pretending to dive or whatever, like Harry Enfield or something, the guy
Mm.
literally jumps into the box, and the referee goes, well, I can't really give a penalty for that because that'd be a little too outrageous. Just go for a little bit of outrageous, and we'll give a free kick, and then hits the crossbar, goes up, and then he sort of bungle it into the back of the net.
That's just with a couple of minutes left as well, which is what kind of adds to the
Dying
whole,
seconds.
the whole horribleness of the whole situation. Even that goal itself is just dreadful, in the whole, every element of it is horrendous, and you just, if you look at it again, the kind of desperation from, I think, Kevin Moore and other people on the line to just try and get something there, but
Yeah,
just nobody could compete with Coolamans in the air. But yeah, exactly. I mean, and that the goal itself is iconic. That's disallowed. I think the photographs after the match and the footage after the match of the kind of rage in the Irish, bench and team. I think one of I mean, I remember. I more remember actually as a child the goal that Belgium scored than necessarily the goal that was disallowed. And what I do remember also, the like horrendous weather on the night, the kind of thunder and lightning, and just the some shots of the Irish bench at the end, and just the kind of
the head and
devastation, because
hands.
it was a massive moment, because we had dropped a point at home against Belgium, although dropped a point might be kind of a strong word. They were an extremely strong team, and to secure a point was brilliant for the Irish team, actually, in many ways. But we needed something in our away games, and we looked set fair to get something, and would have deserved something in that game. And we had played well, so whilst under pressure. So yeah, it's a bizarre goal. If anybody hasn't seen it, you may look at it. Even the referee himself, I think, in the book there, I have, Paul Howard famously wrote an article where he went and found the referee
Yep,
Nazare in Portugal many years later, brought a copy of the video of the match with him in video. First of all, asked him before he showed him the video as to why he disallowed the goal, and the referee went through a number of different reasons, none of which stacked up against the actual footage. And then looking at the footage, he struggled even then, I think, to come up with a reason. So if you look at it, just purely looking at it visually, um, I think, I mean, I know there's a lot of strong words spoken about it. I don't think anything can be proved one way or the other necessarily, and certainly not from now. But what's clear is, at the very least, there was a level of incompetence about what he did, and we suffered, and we tended to suffer maybe more than other countries, in those
we did.
situations. Yeah.
We
And if
did.
you look at it, he gives the free kick, which is fair enough. Brady's going to take it quickly. He's running into the box with his back to Brady. He blows his whistle and finds himself in the middle of the players, which he positions himself terribly. When he turns around, the ball's in the back of net. There's a Belgian player on the ground, and he doesn't know what's happened, I think. And so, if we're being charitable, he doesn't know what's happened. He looks to his linesman. His linesman can't see any reason or anything particularly wrong with it, because he stares back at him, and then eventually, after I think it's 2 or 3 seconds, puts his flag up, and they disallow the goal. And I think, yeah,
Yeah,
it just really is. It's a horrible
we,
moment.
we do have it we have shared on Lansdowne Road, because with Lansdowne Road we have, like, on this day this happened, and we show the footage best we can, or we'll at least write about it. And I put it up there. I was like, honestly, have a look at this. If you'd never seen this before, have a look at this. It is that blatant. It is that bad. Sometimes people say, oh, we're always, after Paris, Roy Keane was, you always remember him having a go at the Irish team. Why didn't you clear the ball? Like, there's nothing like that here. This is
Mm.
just, not their fault. I mean, you touched on earlier on, you were saying that you wanted to write a book because there's not enough Irish books out there. I agree with that. And what I would always say, and the lads I do the podcast with, Martin and Connor, say Irish football is fascinating.
Yeah.
Like whatever decade you look at it, there's a scandal, there's robbery, there's skullduggery, something happening, you know. And I also, what I love about the book as well, and I don't want to give too much away because really, when you're out there, I want you to go out and buy this book. Trust me, if you enjoy what we do in Lansdowne Road, you'll absolutely love the book. I loved it, and it was stuff that, like, I think I know a little bit about Irish football, but there's stuff that I wasn't aware of or completely forgotten about. Loads of little nuggets of information. Don't want to give those away because you have to go out and buy it and read it. Um, but I love how you start with the John Giles era coming to an end with the game in Cyprus,
Mm.
and then Dunphy obviously loves Giles, as we know. Would probably take a bullet for him, and it's so funny when you see, you leave John alone. Basically, his articles, you leave John alone. How dare you question him? He's a football man. He's this, he's that. And then towards the end, for Owen Hand, he absolutely terrorized. No, that was before my time, but I haven't
Mm.
gone back and done my research. He terrorized
Yes.
Owen Hand, and I was kind of, I expected, I could see what you were doing there. You were sort of,
Yeah, well, I didn't want to go too far into that in a way, but what it
yeah,
was, I mean, it struck me at the time so I wanted to get, I suppose, the campaign started, for those who don't know, with Giles still in charge. So we had an away game in Cyprus,
yeah,
and so that was on the back of a pretty kind of lame performance against England away in Wembley in the end of the European Championship qualifiers, and I think Giles at that stage, I mean, he was working with Shamrock Rovers and part owner Shamrock Rovers. He was running the Irish team. There was more work perhaps being heaped on it. He'd been doing it for a number of years, so I think that in a way, it was kind of had run its course to some extent. But it was kind of interesting to see. I think one of the things I really loved about doing the book, and actually similarly with the Dixie Dean book before, is looking back at the newspaper coverage of the time,
it's
and reading
fascinating,
what
isn't
people are
it?
doing. Yeah. So when you see, like, John Giles has an article, in the Sunday Independent each weekend, so he's explaining how the 3-2 win in Cyprus is actually, a great result because we haven't won away for a long time. And at the end of the day, I don't think this is going to come down to goal difference. It's very important to get your points.
Yeah.
And that's, so that kind of thing, without giving the game away, obviously people should know any, but nevertheless, that kind of catches your eye. And then you read, people probably wouldn't be, maybe if younger people wouldn't be aware of the likes of Con Houlihan, who was a brilliant journalist who wrote,
Mm.
would have, I think it was 3 days a week, he'd have more or less half the back page of the Evening Press, in which he would write on whatever he liked to write about. But at that particular time, he got stuck into John Giles, and partially stuck into maybe fellow journalists who were prepared to toe the Giles line when he felt that Ireland weren't really doing as well as they could be doing, and that Giles should really be doing, maybe should be based here and working here, and full time in this position. And so he effectively agreed with John Giles that he should be a full time Ireland manager, and that's what we really need. But he didn't feel that Ireland played the kind of football that we could play, and that we weren't particularly attractive. And then the results weren't coming. Maybe, it was
See
time to
that.
go.
See, that's what I love about, and I knew when I was reading the book, I thought you haven't just gone and read books, other people's books. You probably have, like, a little bit, but you've gone back to the archives, because I knew, because I write some articles myself, and I always go back to the archives, because I find when a book gets written, generally not the case with this book, by the way. There's always, like, there's a narrative, isn't there? There's a
Mm,
narrative that builds. It gets sealed and it gets put away, and then that's it. And then people go by that narrative, and it's often missing the gory details, the warts and all stuff. And you only get that when you go back to the newspaper articles, and you go back to the media of the day.
yeah.
And I could see that, like, there's stuff there about, I say some people would be very surprised, like the facts about the Irish fans at the time.
I have to say, I was really surprised at that
Yeah.
particularly, because I had never heard that, nor seen that. And I was obviously, now at its 10-year-old at the time. I probably wouldn't have been aware of it. I don't remember any kind of reporting on it on news programs, but
Mm.
nevertheless, I suppose at the time as well, I don't think it was major trouble that was caused. But
No.
and just to give a bit of context, essentially that away game in Brussels, I think it was probably the largest Irish crowd ever to travel to an away game, which is kind of interesting that was building. I think there'd been 1,500 in Paris, and then there were 6,000 going to Brussels, and probably a lot of people had never travelled before to the continent or anywhere, which would have been part of it. And to give a bit of background context, also we were in the midst of the hunger strikes, and the troubles in Northern Ireland were possibly at their worst in many ways.
Mm.
So there was a kind of a background narrative there also, and a depth of feeling. But a lot of people would have had to travel across the UK and by ferry to Brussels, and it seemed like a lot of trouble was caused, or certainly a lot of graffiti damage was done to a ferry on the way over. And
Yeah.
then in the likes of Ostend, there was quite a lot of trouble, I think, with, I suppose, Irish fans, and then also on to Brussels. And now I don't think it was really, really high level stuff. Certainly nothing of the kind that was going on, with British fans
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
across Europe. So, but it was, I suppose, in a way, it was of a time that maybe people might have just been used to hearing about it, and therefore they didn't pay an awful lot of attention to it. But what was really striking was a number of quotes in some of the Irish papers from, like, Belgian hoteliers hoping that we never come back, which
It's
really,
mad, isn't it?
really, yeah, that kind of, I just never heard of it, and I never realized it, because we know we have such a strong reputation, and it's been built on
Yeah.
very solid foundations, but clearly it wasn't always that way. And maybe, I suppose, if we were to look back at it in a positive way, um, perhaps if we take the English and British fans, they went one way, for certainly for the next few years, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we went another, and that was a good thing. I mean, I remember one of the first tournaments I do remember seeing as a child was that 1980 European Championships, and I remember England playing Belgium in that, and I remember Ray Clements on the England bench, and there was tears streaming down his face, not through emotion, but because there was tear gas being fired at fans who were rioting in the stands. So that really struck me as a child as well. But as I say, maybe it's whilst the Irish fans caused some trouble, or some did in that particular instance, it wasn't then something that carried on, because there's
No.
no
Well.
reference to it again when we go to Rotterdam or
Yeah.
we play any other away game. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
want
It's
to
not
belabor the
endemic.
point, put it that way. Yeah, but it was something that
Yeah.
really was kind of somewhat eye catching, I suppose.
But that's what I liked. That's what I liked about it. It's an honest book. It's not just. I'm not. It was like I'm not just going to go into a narrative. No, I'm going to go in and going to lift the bonnet up, have a look, and see what you can find. Because I was, newspaper articles. I love that at the time. You go, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That never gets mentioned anymore. So no, I really loved that about it. Yeah, and like we're not. I mean, I'm traveling support. I'm over here in Luxembourg right now, and all that, and the behaviors. You get the gobshite, but like most of the time, the behavior is pretty pristine. It's the odd
Mm.
silly thing that happens. It's always going to happen with drink, but yeah, as you say, late 80s. Irish fans, and it would probably opened us up. Probably opened us up a little bit more to a bit more culture, didn't it?
Yeah.
Traveling to around the continent a bit more, because as you said, that was at the time the largest away following. Because the
Mm.
Irish team never really had a great away following, not because there was such a bad team. I mean, we always had a good team, and we didn't have great results. It's just nobody had any money at
That's
the time
exactly it. Yeah. So
to
people
travel.
didn't. Yeah, couldn't travel. So there's only 7 years between that and the massive crowds of the European Championships in '88. It's not a long period of time. It seems like two completely different times, and in a way, it was. But that's one of the reasons, again, to try. Initially, when I was researching or writing the book, what I kind of wanted to avoid was just doing a kind of a hindsight. I didn't want to appear to be whinging or complaining either, but
Yeah,
just to take it from game to game, because at the time, if you look at it, just purely take it in real time, we're in a really tough group. We're competing really, really well. And so the reporting on it is kind of, when you take it from just that perspective, there's no looking back. There was, when we had a goal disallowed in Paris also, and then
yes,
Brussels. So we had, and there was history of that, because we previously had a goal disallowed in Paris and in Sofia. So in previous campaigns. So that was clearly picked up by media at the time, that there was something not right about this, or at least that we were certainly suffering at the hands of referees at crucial periods in matches or moments. Whether, again, that
yeah,
was a deliberate thing or not, who can say? One interesting
yeah,
element on that as well, from talking to Owen Hand, was he feels very strongly about the Portuguese ref on the night. He made an interesting point about the FAI's treatment of referees in general at the time, in as much as a lot of other countries would roll out the red carpet for the referee when he's coming for an international match. But he more or less said that the FAI almost, maybe treated the referee as badly as they treated the players. He was surprised at times at where referees were being hosted and how they were being looked after. Now,
yeah,
that's not to say that you should be entirely looking to curry favour with referees, but the treatment, he felt that when it came down to a crucial moment in a match, there was a sense that the Irish weren't serious, and we weren't a serious outfit or a serious operation, and therefore, with 50,000 baying Belgians, maybe it's just easier to give it the other way. And who's going to complain?
Yeah. And referees back then, weren't properly trained. They weren't professionals that I'm aware of. They weren't. You always hear stories like English teams, club teams, going over getting absolutely robbed, blind in European Cup games, and it was a famous story with Liverpool where I think one player like booted the referee, and the referee did nothing, and that's when he knew, like, you're on the.
Yeah,
But
but
anyway,
famously within a couple of years, there was a proven case involving Belgian clubs and English clubs and Nottingham Forest, I think Salford in particular. So you can see
yeah,
why suspicion was there, and there were famous cases. But I suppose I would be loath to say that there was anything definite. But that idea perhaps that Ireland, because it seemed to happen just away from home. I don't recall any big home goals that were ever disallowed. It was critical games, critical junctions,
yeah,
tight matches away from home where that goal could have made a massive difference. And that's really kind of part of the premise of the book, that things turned against us. And those kind of goals could have changed people's, I suppose, could have changed football in Ireland to some extent, or much more quickly or earlier.
yeah,
Who's to say how that would have played out? But nevertheless, if we'd been going to the '82 World Cup rather than the '88 European Championships, there's a 6-year difference there, and what impact might that have had on everybody involved?
exactly. Like, I mean, and on Lansdowne Road, we would. There's a lot of stuff about Jack and Mick and all, because we had a fabulous team. But what people forget is that we had a fantastic side. That was a quality side.
Mm.
That Owen Hand had. Like, obviously he went from Jerry Payton to Jim McDonough, and then obviously Packy Bonner would eventually come in. But you had players like Mark Lawrenson, Kevin Moore making his debut, Chris Hughton on the left. And you had Michael Robinson come in, Frank Stapleton up front. You had Liam Brady in the middle. You had some and Kevin Sheedy. What had Kevin Sheedy around
Sheedy only came in just at
the
probably the following campaign, but they were
following
kind of on the
campaign?
fringes. Yeah, he was playing under 21s at that stage. But Tony Galvin was to arrive then September, like going into the next campaign.
Yeah,
Um, which is part of actually another consideration of the book later on, is that had we qualified, a couple of things might have happened. We might have been seeded higher the next time around, which means gives us a better chance to qualify for the next tournament. You've
yeah,
got players then who are interested, because at the time we did pick up a lot of players from England with backgrounds. Tony Galvin, who had just won the cup at Spurs, had
yeah.
decided he's going to play for Ireland.
And Ronnie
And so
Whelan
you're,
obviously came in as
yeah,
well.
and he was only 19 coming in. Kevin O'Callaghan, as I say, was flying with Ipswich. He was in the squad. There was serious talent there and more talent coming. But if you were coming into a confident, squad that was going into the next tournament, that may have changed again how that tournament turned out for us, or that qualification tournament. But Owen felt really that actually it was such a crushing kind of blow after previous instances, perhaps, as well, as we go back to goals disallowed in Sofia and Paris in previous tournaments, that it was actually just had a big psychological effect on the players, and it was very
Yeah,
hard to get them up again for the next qualification tournament, I suppose. But again, I didn't want the book to be a whine about all that, more a kind of taking it game by game. And I mean, I'd say that was probably,
yeah,
if you look at it, it's arguably one of our greatest ever qualification campaigns, because there's we've obviously qualified, so you would say anytime that we've qualified, that's a better campaign, but we weren't necessarily up against the same caliber of opponent, and we certainly
no.
would have been the fourth seed in that group. So to miss out so narrowly and cruelly.
Like
Yeah.
Belgium, one of the top sides in the world. France, Netherlands, and ourselves there. Like, and to go out in goal difference was just incredible.
And
Yeah, I
even
mean,
worse, I think, or more cruel in some ways, is that England and Northern Ireland in much easier groups qualified on one less point. And I always think that was a real kick in the teeth in a way,
yeah,
not to qualify like that.
it's mad. It's mad to think like you could have had a sustained period of success all through the 80s. With those players coming, then eventually, one of the criticisms of the Irish side was obviously having was having the complete quality centre forward. Which with John Aldridge would come along in 1986.
Mm.
He was a goal machine for Liverpool, and you could have this sustained period of just a quality Irish team. But obviously, it does fall to pieces for own hand, and yeah, the trip to the South American trip and trying to get a
Yeah.
team for Argentina, and Greenest Color is a great documentary, and he gives it the full flavor where he asks Ron Atkinson trying to get a team.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of all of those kind of things is like, I mean, obviously
Yeah,
just back when the Falkland War was going on, they were
yeah,
looking for players to go and play. from English clubs, it was madness to even think that you would imagine being asked to have to go and ask the English managers, can we have your players for such a tour? It was
Because the
bonkers,
country you're
really.
at war with, like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, so it really, yeah, it was a different time. It was a very difficult time to be the manager because there was an awful lot on you, obviously. And that's something that, again, when I talked to Owen, I didn't want him to rehash the campaign. I wanted him to think about what if we had qualified, how might that have gone? But even then, I think such was his trauma of having worked for the FAI perhaps in that period, that the first things he talked about was how difficult he thought it was going to be to organize going there and getting the kind of camp that you wanted and getting things, because he felt that would fall on him and
yeah,
Terry Conroy, and obviously he'd lean on Ray Tracy, who at the time had moved into kind of travel agency and did work with the FAI. But he was quite worried about that side of things and how would we get set up, and that's just going to take up so much time. It's going to be awkward and it'll be constant battling with the FAI, etc., to get things the way you want it.
yeah.
So
He
it's
tells the
interesting that
story.
that was the first thing comes to mind, when you're saying, "Oh, would you not be excited to go to the World Cup?" He was thinking, "Oh God."
Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, when you think about it, especially the FEI around that time, I mean,
Yeah,
like the way they dealt with things. He tells a story, doesn't he, where we didn't have a chef because when you're going to the Eastern Europe, you're always weary.
yeah.
The
Moscow
Iron Curtain,
tummy is what you were having to, yeah,
Moscow.
watch out for. That was
Yeah,
the Danish manager had warned them to bring your own food, bring your own chef if you can,
uh,
for this game in Moscow. Yeah.
and they wouldn't get a chef, and he ended up getting his own wife in, and she became the chef.
Yeah, well, he said that he kind of suggested that he wanted the chef from the Burlington, who actually had traveled with Liverpool a lot for their away European games, and he thought, well, based on what the Danish told him, maybe this would be a good idea and a good way to prepare and make sure that we're not, there's no funny business with the food alone. And so when the FAI didn't want him to bring the trained chef, he said that in an effort to embarrass them, he suggested bringing his wife,
Yeah.
but they weren't so easily embarrassed, put it that way.
No, I mean, yeah, the stuff he had to deal with. I mean, that would because he wasn't a full time manager there as well.
Yeah,
I think he was managing Limerick
Limerick at the
at the
start,
time.
anyway. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it was just like he had so much on his plate, literally, and dealing with that. That would absolutely just grind anyone down. Like we thought
yeah,
the FEI were bad, like so subsequent years. Jack sort of went in there. He kind of kicked. Jack was Jack,
yeah.
but Owen was probably a bit more of a, look, I'll work with you guys, but you
I
need to give
think
me
that's
something.
part of it, yeah, and that was a big difficulty of it for him. But then at the other
Yeah,
side, when we talked about, I mean, there was the potential that if we did qualify, well, then the power balance shifts a little bit towards the manager a bit more, and so
yeah,
that he might have been, the FAI would have been under the microscope in terms of how they operated, 6 years or 7 years before they ever were, or even 10 years before they ever were. So that might have been interesting to see how that, because it would have been difficult for them to duck out of their responsibilities. And also, I mean, one of the problems he always had over the years was having a squad for international matches at the size that he'd like to have.
yes,
And that may sound kind of, you say, well, what's the difference between having 16 or 18 players or whatever it is? But it makes a difference in training, and it makes a
massive.
difference in training if lads are arriving over on Sunday night or Monday or even Tuesday, and you're trying to have training games and you've only got 12 players. So anybody who runs a kids football team knows what that's like, if you're trying to do something on
Yeah,
training. So those kind of things that impacted your preparation big time. And so if for a World Cup, they would have to name a squad of a certain size and go with that squad. So if you're
fair
away
play.
then as
Yeah,
well, you're getting maybe 2 weeks training together we never had. So you're getting a camp that we never got till '88. So again, what impact could that have had for the next campaign when you've got players together for that period of time instead of just having them for 2 days or 3 days at a time? They're working together more closely. You've more time to consider ideas and how you might go about things. And then you've got another potential 2 weeks or 3 weeks in the World Cup as well. So a month together was unheard of and never happened for an Irish team. So perhaps that could have had another impact as well in terms of how we progressed from that period.
yeah. It's always funny when you hear the story when they're at Euro '88 and um, basically, I'm not sure if it's on Green is the color. I think it's on another DVD where when we go out to the Dutch, like 8 minutes from the semi-finals, we go out to an offside goal and all that. And then some of the FBI was like, "Oh, Jesus, thank God." Because what do you mean, thank God? It's terrible. Because no, we had no money for the next round. We only had enough money for barely enough money for the 3 games.
Jesus,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's just
But at the end of
and
the day, I mean, I think it's worth recognizing, and I don't, I know all the stories, I've heard all the stories of the FBI, but they were a very small operation in a
yes,
different time. Perhaps the criticism that we may lay at their door subsequently is fairer than maybe at a time when they really were kind of a. Now, at the same time, that's not to give them an out either. I mean, there were people there, it would appear, who took the job to be a means in which they could head off on a few foreign trips and whatever else, and they didn't take it as it maybe as seriously as they might have, and that was the this campaign and Giles before them, they actually took us a few steps forward where the manager started to get more control over what they wanted to do and who they could have in their squads, because even back before Giles' time they didn't get to pick the squad. So they had more control, they pushed us on a bit more, and even was this particular campaign ended in heartbreak, it still took us closer than we'd ever been to a World
yeah,
Cup, and so we moved the dial to a large extent, even if there was a dip again afterwards. A lot of those players are the ones who figured in the '88 European Championships. Which was in a way a very kind of a heartening thing or a nice thing that a lot of them eventually made it. Put it that way, to a tournament, and they deserve to be there.
yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it is a complete time capsule. As I said, I love the research. I love the research. I love that you've gone back to the archives. And the memories of you kind of watching them, it was bringing it back for me, watching like certain campaigns, unsuccessful campaigns with the family, and everyone's in the house, and the mother going mad. And, it's just a different time.
They were
And
the only
honestly,
games that were on as well. This is the thing, there was FA Cup final, there was the European
yeah,
Cup final. You mightn't even get the UEFA Cup final on the telly in those days.
yeah.
You relied
But
on, for live football. It was
I mean,
international matches and tournaments.
and RTE didn't show an Ireland friendly live until France 1989 in Delimo Park. So, like, even the famous win over Brazil wasn't on
Yeah,
telly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I remember we did a podcast on this a couple of years ago, and I actually had the TV listings, and it was like some farm show or something they had on live, because it was only like a 3 o'clock kickoff. And it's just mad to think that was a completely different time. And
But we were
also,
playing. Remember, Owen Hand's first game as Ireland manager effectively was against Argentina in Lansdowne Road,
yeah,
and Maradona was playing, etc. And I think that night RT were scheduled to show horse racing from the Curragh or something like that. I
yeah,
mean, it just, the world champions are coming to town with this wonder kid, and we're going to show you
generational talent.
a bit of horse racing again. And that was
Yeah,
one of the things actually as a child. Now, maybe people have different views about horse racing, but my whole childhood of watching Grandstand and World of Sport and Sports Stadium was waiting for the horse racing to end, so something
me
else, some
too.
whatever, and then you couldn't, and then you'd miss the shagging thing that you wanted to see because you'd flicked away to just watch something else, and you're waiting to
Yeah.
see not even football. It was something like the one or maker mile with Eamon Coughlin, running, and he knew he'd run in it and he'd won it, but they keep saying it's coming up, and then you're at fucking Haydock or Kempton Park or something in the rain watching them, and then you flick away,
Oh,
and then when you come back, it's like it was never there. You never saw it, and it was gone. I just used to drive me mad.
I know. So, and we're going to join the action from the Curragh. I was like,
Yeah,
action? It's not action. It's
no,
crap. And my
yeah,
granddad, yeah, I remember the sports stadium grandstand. I'm like, bloody horse race. It just bored me. So it still bores me today. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate tweets over that, but it does just absolutely bores the hell out of me. But yeah, no, honestly, love the book, Paul. Fantastic stuff. And I honestly got to recommend anyone out there, if you like your football history, get this book. The facts, the bits and pieces, like especially for the younger viewers, like trying to get a team, like a qualifier on the same day as a League Cup semi-final or the day before a League Cup semi-final. Just madness, different times, just different time really in football. But Paul, listen, thank you very much for coming on. Really do appreciate you. I know you're going to watch the Nations League in a few
that's
minutes.
it. Yeah, gonna get watch that there. But thanks so much for having me. I'm really delighted to talk to you. So it was great, really
No,
good.
you're more than welcome. And yeah, if you write another book, hopefully we'll get you on for that as well.
Great, thanks very much, Dave.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. I really did. He's a lovely fella, Paul. And yet again, if you like your Irish football history, please do buy the book. It's in the link below. It's a fantastic read. You won't be sorry. About 200 pages long, and I read it in about 3 days. I really did. It's a marvelous book. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the link below. Head over to our Facebook, Instagram, and a Twitter account, and head over to lansdowneroad.ie for opinion. And don't forget, buy the book. See you in the next one.